One of my favourite books of 2023 is a book called Shoemaker by Joe Foster, which is the story of Reebok, the iconic sports brand. When I read the book, it was very interesting as a story, but I'd got no idea that I'd actually have the opportunity to meet Joe. Since then, I've actually met him twice, and now he's going to be here today as a guest on the podcast. Reebok is one of the success stories of the late 20th century, but it almost didn't happen. In fact, it almost didn't happen several times over. And in the book, Joe tells the story. Today, I want to welcome onto Buying and Building Businesses a very special guest, Mr. Joe Foster.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Joe, and very, very, very warm welcome to the show.
Thank you. Buying and building businesses. Okay. Gotcha.
Yes, absolutely. So hopefully spot on point for you. I wanted to start by asking you a little bit about ambition, because if you read your book, there's a story of something coming from a small town in Lancashire to becoming a global brand.
Right.
And so you started obviously with the family business, then you set up Mercury, which evolved into Reebok. So when you set up Mercury, what was the ambition at that stage?
Well, quite briefly, the ambition was to earn a living. Because if you've read the book, seen in the book, the biggest problem Jeff and myself faced was a failing company. And that was the company my grandfather founded in 1895. And his sons, who just did not get on at all, they just feuded all their life. And the business suffered because of that. So what we needed was to find ourselves a living. And of course, we were in the sports footwear industry, so it seemed to be the best thing to get back into the sports footwear industry. From that, of course, we probably had the ambition that J.W. Foster would be a company to grow, but of course it couldn't because it wasn't ours. And although my father said, when your uncle's gone and I'm gone, the business will be yours, you can do what you like with it. And my response to that was, well, okay, Dad, we don't want you to go. Number one, we don't want you to go, but this business will be gone long before you are. It didn't seem to make any difference. So it took Jeff and myself a couple of years going to college, figuring out how we could set up a business, and then leaving the family business, and that was it, Mercury Sports Footwear.
But that grew, the ambition grew presumably pretty quickly from once you'd got past that point of realizing you could make a living.
Yes, once we got past that point, it was really a matter of saying, well, businesses either grow or they fail, because plateauing is not an option. You can get to a point and you can plateau, but then you've either got to take it off again and start growing again or scaling again, or you're going to fall off the edge and you're going to go down. So I guess our ambition was, okay, we may plateau on occasions, but it's got to be the drive for what's next. How can we develop? How can we scale this business? In fact, in those days, how can we grow our business? Because scaling is a fairly new sort of part of the new language that we have. Scaling and pivoting is very new, but we did that. We did scale, we did pivot.
Yes. And it wasn't easy, because when you read the book, you see there were a lot of problems, and it almost seemed like a constant struggle. It wasn't a sort of glitz and glamour all the way.
Well, no, but it did teach us a lot. It taught us that when you get a problem, it's not to get despondent with that. It's how can we turn that problem into an advantage? How can we make it work for us? We had to change our name, and we came up with a better name. We had to change our silhouette, and we ended up with a better silhouette. And I think that was what we sort of built our business on, the fact that there will be problems, and if there are not problems, in fact, you've got to, what spurs you on, what really gets you to the next level. And almost the next level is that okay, we were selling our product nicely, we were doing direct sales. Should we go for a distributor in the UK? So, and those were the decisions. So we did go for a distributor, which eventually nearly took us out of business. But
Yes.
but
Yes.
again, challenges.
That seems to be the biggest example, actually, of the point, the resilience that you had to show, not just to thrive, but to survive, because that whole Lawrence Sports situation could have been the end.
It could have been the end. It was meant to be the beginning. The idea behind it was, well, Jeff was looking after the factory. He was happy looking after the factory, and it dropped onto my lap. But I've got to look after everything else, which was really, how do we? What's our next step? We did some good sales before we got to Lawrence. Well, that would be great, because our cash flow, then we would have a constant cash flow. Every week, product would go down to Lawrence, and every week we would get the check. Great. That allowed me then to concentrate on, well, how do we, because we decided that when we got to a certain size, do we increase our product range? But increasing our product range meant really stepping into the territory that was well owned by Adidas in those days. And the big one, of course, was football, or if you were American, it was soccer. That was a big one. So that would have cost a lot of money, mind you. Extending our territory, which meant going outside of the UK, with Europe or America, because we'd already extended into what was the empire and what was now the Commonwealth. We were doing relatively reasonable business, not big business, because we were not really set up as a manufacturing unit to really extend our production and sort of go through those distances. So, but America was a different thought, and so it was going to America. So this was our progression steps. Where do we go? How do we scale our business? We scale our business. The decision was, and the reason why we did that is the government, bless the government in those days, they were advertised in a magazine I was reading, and they wanted us to export to America in particular, and they were willing to pay for the stand at the NSGA show, National Sporting Goods of America. They were willing to do that. They were willing to pay for the return airfare, and to pay 50% of all our costs while we're in America. So that sort of brought America very much nearer. And since it wasn't going to cost us really any money to go over there, take that opportunity, which is what we did. So that was our next step, and that resulted in growth.
One of the other flavors that comes out of the book is the importance of people and relationships in business, and also the idea that you don't have to be unpleasant, ruthless. You don't have to stand on people in order to get on. And there seem to be some key points in the story where the fact that you had been good to people when you needed help, when you needed them, they were there for you.
Oh, indeed. And we had a few of those. Not many. We didn't get much business advice. I think mainly because I never came across anybody who was a global business. So we didn't seem to get much advice in that direction. I think now you can get a lot of advice and a lot of help. In fact, I think one of the important things about today's market is if you're setting up and you have a business and you want to develop that business, scale that business, you can look around you. There's so many books now. There's so much advice you can get, and it's easier. We didn't have that. Money wasn't available either. We didn't have angels. We didn't have any VCs. It just wasn't there. Only the bank. But people who would help you. John Willie Johnson, as he's probably read, I mean, he was a real friend. He just used to buy machinery. I'm sure he bought machinery specifically so he could lend it to me.
Mm. Yeah. And the other one was Shaq.
Oh, Shaq, yeah. Well, Shaq, he'd been a friend for many years, and of course, he was the man who really got me to join in with Lawrence, because
Mm.
he was the sales director there at Lawrence, and when he left, of course, and it's amazing. It's amazing how the son-in-law of the owner came in to run the company, and for whatever reason, he had no business sense at all.
Mm.
Where he'd come from inside Perkins, who used to make diesel engines. And I think he was just an engineer. So all he thought was, how can we engineer different things? How can we put in a sprinkler system? How can we do the different thing into the building? Instead of saying, we're a footwear company, and they just made football boots and rugby boots, and that's all they made. They didn't make trainers, they didn't make any track or field stuff, and that's why we joined in with them, because it made a nice cooperation. They had business 12 months of the year instead of just the soccer business, but it was for about 6 or 7 months of the year.
Yeah.
Otherwise, all they did was just manufacture more and stock them. So it was really good. But Shaq, of course, when he realized that the company he left was just going down and was failing, and that meant that all our production, well, probably about 80% of our production would just we'd have to find somewhere else to sell it. He did turn up, and yeah, it was very. He'd gone to Barter. He'd gone to Barter to set up their sports division, and he was able to give us an order for 200 pairs a week, which filled a nice slot in our production when Lawrence, of course, fell down. But that was a big experience in itself. That just Lawrence failing, yes.
Just kind of rolling forward in time into the sort of the mid 1980s, you reached a point where you decided to sell your ownership of the well, effectively the business.
Yes.
And obviously you remained involved for a while, but you sold out in the mid 80s. I just want to have a think about that time and what it was that made you realize you'd reached that point where that was the right thing to do.
Well, it was a point when there was an opportunity with aerobics, a big opportunity. The demand on that for aerobics was incredible, and I couldn't afford to finance that. Paul Feynman couldn't afford to finance that, but we had Stephen Rubin. Stephen Rubin, he was sourcing product from the Far East, and it was a change from us manufacturing to becoming a marketing company, to becoming a brand where we had to source product. And that was going to take a lot of money. To get product out of the Far East, you had to have a letter of credit, which meant your bank had to support you. So the bank would only do that if there was sufficient funds around or sufficient means to follow that. Okay, the government had a scheme called ECGD, Export Credit Guarantee Department, that they had, which was all right, but it wasn't going to fund what we needed to get aerobics and to keep with aerobics. We didn't want to starve it. And the opportunity was, well, if somebody's going to put the money in, if somebody's going to really bankroll this company, they're going to need some control. And I decided that the best thing I could do was to let them take over the company. I would still be the founder. So this is about Reebok. Has Reebok got a good opportunity to grow, to become something big? And that
you did it for you. It wasn't a self-serving thing. It was something that was just in the best interest of the business.
Oh, absolutely. It was, and it worked. I mean, it did work because what we got was a credit line from Stephen Rubin, and that credit line grew very rapidly to 20 million. Yes. So he was really backing it with a lot of money, and without ownership, I think he would have probably pulled out very quickly.
Yeah, thank you. Well, our time has flown incredibly quickly. I've got about another 3 hours worth of questions I could ask you if I did have the time, but
But
I
we can
just want
connect
to say,
again some.
well, that would be great. I just want to say thanks again for being on the show today. It's been an amazing experience to talk to you and to listen to you. And hopefully we will meet again.
Well, hopefully, Phil, and I hope your business is successful. And yes, lovely talking to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Joe.